All right, well, I had a question on number 2 on the homework on Big Ideas Math for Intro to Trig Identities. So I'm going to go ahead and work through that problem, and that way, for those that had questions on this problem, hopefully this will help you get through it. So we're given that the tangent of an angle theta is equal to -3/7, and we're told that the angle is somewhere between pi over 2 and pi. And it's asking us to find the other trig function values of theta, so we're going to be looking for sine, cosine, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, so let's first draw out our angle and make sure that we get all the information we can from that. And so in drawing our angle, it tells us that we're between pi over 2 and pi, so that means that we are somewhere in our second quadrant. Then it tells us that the tangent of our angle theta, which let me go ahead and draw that in here using a right triangle, but the tangent of this angle theta is -3/7. Now keep in mind, for tangent, you've got opposite over adjacent. So your opposite side would have to be 3, your adjacent side would have to be 7. Now one of those needs to be negative, and so you're looking at your tangent of theta is equal to -3/7. To decide which one's going to be negative, you have to think about the coordinate system. If you went to the left by 7, that would have to be the -7, and then since you're going up by 3, then that would make sense to be a +3. So now, let's go ahead and find the missing side of this triangle, which I'm just going to call that the hypotenuse. We'll just call it h, why not? So to find the hypotenuse, this just becomes Pythagorean theorem. So we're going to take 3 squared plus -7 squared is equal to our hypotenuse squared. So that's 9 plus 49 is equal to h squared. So 58 is what our hypotenuse squared would be. So then our hypotenuse would just be the plus or minus square root of 58. Now anytime it's the hypotenuse, that's always going to be a positive value. When you're looking for an opposite or an adjacent side, that could be positive or negative, and you actually have to decide that based on, again, the coordinate system. Look at your x and y values. Would it make sense for it to be a positive or a negative value? But for the hypotenuse, that'll always be a positive value. Okay, so now we should have all the information we need. I'm just going to put the equals square root of 58 up here so that we can use that in just a little bit. We now just have to find our missing trig function values. So remember that we're looking then for sine of theta, also for cosine of theta. We already know what tangent of theta is. I'm going to go ahead and write it in here still, just because we're going to be using that to help us find cotangent. And then we'll go ahead and write our reciprocals down. So that would be cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. Okay, so let's go and find sine and cosine, and then we can just use the reciprocals to find the other values. So for sine of theta, remember sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So our opposite was 3. Our hypotenuse was the square root of 58. And then we're going to need to rationalize this value. So to rationalize, you just multiply by the square root of 58 over itself. So then that becomes 3 square root of 58 in the numerator, and denominator is just the square, or is just 58. Okay, let's go ahead and find cosine now. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that would be -7 over the square root of 58. Which then again, you could probably figure out without having to show the work for rationalizing. Again, you're multiplying by the square root of 58 over square root of 58. So that'll just become -7 square root of 58 this time in the numerator, divided by 58 still in the denominator. Okay, so let's go ahead and find our reciprocal identities, and those are best served to use the original ratios here rather than the ones that have been rationalized. You can still work through it with the ones that have been rationalized, but I think it's just easier to use those. So for cosecant of theta, take the reciprocal of sine, so that would just be square root of 58 over 3. For secant, you would take the reciprocal of cosine, so that would be square root of 58 over -7. And then for cotangent, take the reciprocal of tangent, so that would be -7 over 3. I hope this helps. If there's anything else I can answer for you on this homework or in the others, feel free to let me know through email or during office hours. Besides that, have a good rest of your day.